Welcome, everybody out there, to our webinar From Cash Flow Chaos to Confidence. And if you need a better cash flow strategy, you've come to the right spot. We are Hiline, and at Hiline, our mission is to make small business finances stress-free so founders and operators can focus on building great companies. And I'll be your MC for today. I'm Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Hiline. My background, I grew up in professional services. I am a CPA, a bit of an accidental CPA turned entrepreneur, and kind of become obsessed about helping empower small businesses who we feel very strongly are often misunderstood and underrepresented with both financial technology and also the companies that provide services to them. Katie O'Brien is also here with me today. Katie is senior accountant turned rockstar chief of staff. Katie, you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, great to see all of you. Matt said I am his chief of staff right now, but before that, helped our tech and SaaS customers with their accounting and finance.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And last but not least, we have Eric Cohen. Eric's our head of technology. Eric is one of our OG employees here at Highline. He's done pretty much everything from doing bookkeeping work to owning the managing director role for our entire operations team. And most recently, leaning into his affinity for technology and leading our technology strategy. Eric, say hello to introduce yourself, man.
Yeah, Matt, like you said, my name is Eric Cohen. I'm the head of technology. I've been with Hiline now for nearly 8 years. I started in service delivery on the accounting side. I am a CPA. I moved into my current role approximately 3 years ago, where I'm in charge of all things tech stack, API connections, RPA connections, and all those fun things.
All right. So we talked to you about who Highline is, who we work with. Right now, we're working with over 275 companies scattered across the country. Generally, our clients tell us they love us. Our net promoter score is constantly floating at 70 or above. Most of our clients, they stay with us for an average of 4+ years. And last year alone, our team processed $1.6 billion worth of financial transactions through the accounting systems, which is incredible. While we work with companies and small businesses across a lot of different industries, where we've really found our sweet spot to be is working with B2B services companies, agencies, nonprofits, and startups of all shapes and sizes. Agenda for today, we're going to talk about why traditional approaches generally fall short, what good proactive cash management looks like. Katie's going to talk about the fundamentals of good cash flow management, and Eric's going to walk you through some cool tools and templates that he's built to help facilitate this for you all. And we're going to end it with a live Q&A session. Okay. As we said, we love small businesses. We're obsessed with cracking the code to help provide the absolute best financial operations solution that we can. We feel like we can make a real impact on the success of small businesses and their growth trajectory, profitability, cash flow, and just helping them get to where they're trying to go if we do our job really well. And generally, we're in the middle of a bit of a small business boom. In the last 10 years, going back from 2023, there was about a 96% increase in small businesses started, which is incredible. And there was about a 50% increase in small businesses started post-pandemic. In the next 10 years, we think the number of small businesses that get created are going to continue to rise, primarily driven by trends in the workplace, remote work, technology advancements. We could have a whole separate session on that, kind of where that's taken us, and changing workforce preferences. It's never been easier to start a business. You can do it with a laptop, a little bit of money, good business model, and you're off and running. The problem, and we're going to get to this, is more small businesses means more opportunities for mismanaged finances or cash flow challenges. And generally, with the companies that we work with or the companies that we speak with when we're going through our sales cycle, we generally see three common mistakes that small businesses make. One is the do-it-yourself approach. That's a tough one, right? It can be hard to make a trade-off between, do I want to put a couple extra bucks in my pocket? Do I invest it here versus there? Finance and accounting is one of those things that it's not mission critical to your business. It's not core to what you do, but it is essential to make sure that you have a good foundation, to make sure that you're making good decisions. And oftentimes you didn't get into building a business because you were super excited about the accounting and finance part of it, managing cash flow part of it. So it's something that's better, most often better outsourced to somebody that can help accelerate what you're trying to do. Sometimes we also see overinvestments made in house for a small company to go out and hire a really expensive controller, a CFO, and potentially a team and a whole bunch of infrastructure to support it. That can really put a burden on how you're able to allocate the capital and the cash flow that you have. So you don't want to overinvest in that function either. And we also very commonly see folks tend to outsource locally, which stems back to pre pandemic. Most of the time, you look down the street, you look for feedback, you look for referrals and connections from the folks that you know from your local community. It was hard to do business outside of like wherever you put a geofence around where you live and where you operate. Post pandemic, technology, Zoom, all the different technologies companies are building to help you operate your business in the cloud has accelerated incredibly fast in terms of what you can do from a remote position. And it's opened the world to like now you can pick from anybody that you want to, and you should be looking outside of where you live and operate and looking for the absolute best solution that you can. So we also know that of the 5.5 million businesses started in 2023, about 600,000 of them are going to fail, unfortunately, in the next 5 years, predominantly because of poor financial management or cash flow issues. As our mascot squirrel friend here says, 82% of founders also agree and say that poor cash flow was a reason that their business failed. So to get everybody's brains fired up, let's kick off a bit of a polling exercise. In your experience, what is your biggest cash flow challenge in the organization that you're running today? Is it the constant worry and stress about cash for payroll or bills? Our revenue is lumpy. I can't predict what's coming next. It's hard to plan without real-time cash flow visibility. I don't want to talk about it, which is very common. Playing ostrich and burying your head in the sand, which is not a good strategy. And what is cash flow, which is super fair, and commend anybody who's willing to raise their hand and say that's the driving factor. Let's see. Votes coming in. Eric,
Yeah, it looks like one,
what's your
two,
pick?
and four are ahead.
1, 2, and 4 ahead. No, I said, what's your number one?
I'm going to say number one is the biggest one for me that people I see customers have is that they're just really concerned about payroll and their bills. The people are number one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going back to the days where I did a lot of like founder selling, and I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. It was, I think, generally number four. Don't really want to talk about it. It's scary. It's hard. There's only a couple different categories of places you can be in. You can be like the rare business that like never has to worry about cash flow because you just have this unique advantage over the market and extreme pricing power, and you just never have to worry about it. But most businesses, it's a stress or a challenge. It's some point, no matter what. You're going to go through periods where you're going to lose some sleep at night because it's just hard.
Well, you came to the right place if that's the case.
Okay. I gave you my background. We talked about I spent time in traditional professional services. And one of the driving forces for me to found Highline was I just fundamentally always believed that CPA firms, more traditional service providers that are focused on compliance, they didn't really get small businesses the compliance mindset, the compliance skill set, the services they provide, like they just don't translate well to small business operators. Gap financials or tax returns don't help you run your business better. What does that kind of look like? Looking at your bank balance. Look, I'll start by saying accounting is by definition recording of history, right? So, yes, that needs to happen. Yes, you need to know, but it's not super helpful to look at where you've been and not look at what you're going. It's important to use where you've been as a foundation to make better decisions about where you're going. So, the problem with looking backwards is you're looking at your bank balance and you're just ingesting what did I spend money on? Monthly bookkeeping. Generally, that's coming after the fact. Things have already happened. Yes, you need to do it. Yes, you need to have good, clean records and systems. But that alone is not going to help you run a better business. Basic budgeting, if it's not dynamic, you're going to set it and forget it for the year. It's tough if it's not being informed by how things are progressing as you go throughout the year because you may need to make adjustments real time. and spreadsheet guessing. I've been there. I'm sure everybody has been there. I know Eric and Katie have been there. You can spend hours and days agonizing over spreadsheets, trying to figure out or make sense of what happens. Like it's just a waste of time. So, what does good cash flow management look like? Clarity. And I'm going to say, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Clarity should be like probably the most important thing that you feel like you have as an operator. You got to know exactly what's coming in, exactly what's going out. You got to understand how far your cash balance is going to take you. And you got to be able to anticipate or get better at anticipating potential issues that haven't happened yet. Confidence. There's nothing better than being a founder or operator who feels good about the decisions they're making because you feel informed. You should feel confident you can make a hire or an investment. You should feel confident that you understand what your margins are on a big project or on a specific client or revenue stream. And also, I would say equally important is like you should feel calm. Operating your business from a place of fear is just not a good, it's not a good feeling. We've all been there. I've been there. If you feel in control and if you get out in front and you manage your cash flow, like you generally will feel calm. And from a place of calmness, I think that you can actually make much better decisions. I'll share one anecdote somebody shared with me once upon a time that might actually be on this call. It was the 1 in 60 rule, which I'd never heard before. And it speaks to a small miss now is a large miss later. And it speaks to like the concept of a pilot and they're flying a plane. And for every 1 degree error, for every 1 degree off course that you fly, it'll cost you to miss your target by 1 mile for every 60 miles that you fly. So if you're flying from New York to San Francisco, you'd basically miss your airport by 45 or 50 miles. The same concept or principle applies to managing your cash flow. Is our friend, our mascot friend, the squirrel says, you should think about cash flow management as a GPS for your business. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Lean into it. Learn about it. And to talk more about that, I'm going to kick it over to Katie O'Brien to talk about some of the fundamentals. Katie,
Awesome.
take it away.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, first up, we're going to talk about understanding your cash rhythm. And this is really the backbone of your cash management. So, the first thing is your revenue cycles. So, if you look back to the last 12 to 24 months, we need to get an understanding of how your revenue comes in, right? Are you invoicing your customers on the first of every month? Do you collect on the revenue every month? Maybe you invoice quarterly or annually and you're getting bigger payments at different times in the year. Understanding how your cash comes in every month and for the entire year is the biggest part. And then the next thing is your expense timing. So think about all of your fixed expenses, big ones, payroll, rent, utilities, all the things that you pay every month, knowing the amount of those, the day that they get paid. And again, let's look at the last a year or two. Probably most of these things come in on an even basis. The other two things, maybe your business has seasonal fluctuations. That could happen on the revenue or the expense side. Maybe you run a business that collects more revenue in one of the quarters of the year, understanding that, or having expenses that go up or down during certain points of the year. This will help us build a great cash flow system for you.
Yeah, and Katie, in all of this, making sure that your data historically is clean and organized, it only helps you to understand that seasonality, revenue cycles. Having good historical data helps you understand where you're going into the future.
Yes, exactly. Next, we're going to highlight a couple cash flow red flags. I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of these. The biggest one that stands out to me here is cash flow versus profitability. I think this is common in accrual-based accounting, right? You're showing positive net income for the month, but then you're realizing that you're burning cash, right? I think this is confusing for a lot of our small businesses that we work with, and our cash flow system is something that can help you with this. A couple other ones here, payment term misalignment, growth-related surprises, and seasonal impacts. Eric, do any of these red flags stand out to you?
Yeah, cash flow profitability to me is the biggest one in my sense here. Just understanding, just because you're profitable on paper, P&L, does not mean that you're going to not run out of cash at some point. So that is, to me, one of the biggest ones.
Cash is king.
Cash is
100%.
Cash is oxygen.
exactly. Speaking of seasonal impacts, next up, we're going to walk you through an example of a customer that we had that we helped with the cash flow, where we took them from scrambling to scaling. So our customer ran a seasonal events business. They were running out of cash in the off season. They were in the sports business, so their season only took up 4 to 6 months of the year. Those were the only months that they had revenue coming in the door, but the entire year they were dealing with expenses. They had no plan, no forecast, and their books were in disarray. So, understandably, they reached their breaking point. They had no visibility into their finances. They were constantly being reactive instead of proactive when it came to financial management, struggling to make payroll, and unsure if they could even keep operating. At this point, growth felt impossible. So Hiline came in, and more than just a cleanup, we established a strong foundation and system for their cash flow. We cleaned up their books. We built them a 13-week cash flow model. We're going to walk you through what that looks like after this and put a simple cash flow system in place. And the outcome, the three C's that Matt talked about on before: clarity, confidence, and calm. They paid off their debt, stabilized their cash flow, and are now planning on growth, not just survival, which is super exciting. Happy for them. So next up, practical steps to get started before I turn it over to Eric for the most exciting part, our example. So cash flow action plan, going over some of those fundamentals that we talked about earlier. We're going to conduct a complete cash flow timing audit. So when I talked about your revenue and expense timing over the last 12 to 24 months, that's the foundation of your action plan. Using that data, we can build you a 13-week cash flow forecast. And we've actually got 2 tools here so you can do it yourself. So after this event, you're going to get a 13-week cash flow template and a cash flow forecasting checklist. So you can run through all of these steps and take a stab on your own. A couple other things you're going to need to do: identify your cash levers. You can adjust these. Our template is completely toggleable on the revenue and expense side. And then set a regular review cadence. For most of our clients, we suggest every week. It's good to get in there and review what's happening, just so there's no surprises and you don't have to bury your head in the sand like the squirrel, and then create any contingency plans for common scenarios if need be.
Before you keep going, Katie, I'll say I'm just reflecting real time on the things that we hear often when companies come to us. You may ask if you're having some stress in your business, generally speaking, generally it all points back to cash flow. Wanting to get a better handle on your cash flow. We tend to hear folks label it as, I need a CFO. If I get a CFO, everything's going to be good. They're going to make it easier. Sure, a CFO can do this, but you don't have to invest in a CFO to do this. You can get this work fractionally, and you can also be taught how to understand this too. It's actually in your best interest to understand this to an extent as an operator. We have folks say, I need help budgeting. I want FP&A. I want cash flow forecasting. I need help understanding my margins. Like, generally speaking, it always points back to wanting to understand your cash flow. If you're going to focus on upskilling or learning one skill or partnering with somebody to do one thing better, start with the fundamentals of understanding the ins and outs, and as Katie said, the rhythm of your cash flow for your business.
Totally. Cash flow analysis is our one thing. It's the biggest.
I stole your slide. Sorry.
No problem. I was going to say it's the biggest piece of kind of what I think about as your report card, your financial report card, right? Your cash flow, your cash burn. Like, it's one of your biggest metrics of your business. So now I'll turn it over to Eric.
Hey everyone, again, I'm Eric Cohn, and I'm here to walk you through some real examples of how you can use Hiline's 13-week cash flow summary report to help you run your business like a boss. So let me set the stage here for my demo company, Nutshells Book Inc., keeping it in the squirrel family business here. The business owners finally got their books in order, so we know they're running a profitable business, but cash always seemed tight, right? We're finally using Hiline's 13-week cash flow report. So, we could stash away enough nuts, and winter is coming. So let's get serious here, all right? So we can easily see using Highline's cash flow dashboard that if we run the business as usual, we will run short of cash around 4th of July, which is only 9 weeks away. This is certainly scary, right? The fact that we won't be able to make payroll, everyone depending on us. But what is important here is that we're being proactive. And we know this today. So we have 9 weeks to do something about it, right? So let's talk about what we can do. Since cash flow is like a puzzle, everything's connected. Once you find the right pieces to shift, the answer to that financial picture becomes a little bit clearer. So, to oversimplify this, you have two main levers that you could pull. Number one, you could increase or speed up the cash coming in, or two, you could decrease or slow down the cash going out. So let's start with money coming in. Reminder, we have only 9 weeks before we run out of cash. With that, we currently have this big new customer that is going to start services on July 1st. If we move up the start date for just that one customer in our adjustments tab for just a half a month earlier, the whole financial picture changes. So now we're cash
Yeah.
flowing, right? Huge. Just moving one weekly contract up that was starting July 1st to June 15th. That's huge. I know today that I need to get the sales team to understand the importance of this goal, which will make a huge difference to my business. Now, there's a bunch of other things you could do to get cash in and speed up things as well. Katie, you have any ideas there?
Definitely. I think one big one is thinking about your payment terms on your invoices, right? So a lot of companies send out their invoices with net 30 payment terms. That means that on average, you're not even going to get paid for 30 days. So you could move up your payment terms, right? You can do upon receipt invoices. If in a net 15, net 10, that'll encourage your customers to pay you faster. So though you're invoicing on the same cadence, you've got cash coming in the door at a quicker interval.
100%. Some other ideas, and again, every business is different, but to incentivize maybe annual payments, maybe just the speed of you getting your invoices out are really slow, which is obviously going to slow down receiving it. Maybe it's time for an equity investment, just more sales targets in general. But all these things could certainly help get cash in. All right. Next example for lever number 2, reducing, slowing down cash out. Back to our original baseline of running out of cash in approximately 9 weeks. But this time, the sales team basically told us to kick rocks. They can't move up that big contract. Not happening. So now we're focusing on pushing out some expenses. Back to our adjustments tab in our 13-week cash flow. We see a few expenses coming up. We see some rent, legal, some contractor expenses. We know we can't move the rent or legal expenses, but we have a great relationship with our contractor and we could renegotiate that. So let's flip this again and we could renegotiate to net 30. Just flipping that into net 30 for that one contractor gave us a runway up to 14 weeks, which is huge and buys us more time to make additional adjustments down the road. Katie, I'm going to throw it back to you again. What are some other things you could think of slowing down your cash or reducing it?
Yeah. In this instance, we're going to slow down that cash out. Another thing we could do is stop the cash out. So if you do an audit of all the expenses, all the contractors you're paying, maybe there's some in there you could cut for a couple months or even indefinitely. Maybe you're paying for multiple different contractors in one area and you can say goodbye to one of them. Sounds sad, but it'll help your cash flow.
Absolutely. Review those recurring payments as well. And just with AP, you don't have to pay it early, especially if you're in a cash crunch. So if I could just leave you with one thing, it is super important to actively monitor your cash flow, to understand when you're actually going to have crunches, and proactively do something about it.
Yeah, but Eric, that's a good point. I think the best way to frame it, you have to ensure that your business model enables you to collect cash faster than your vendors are requiring you to pay it out. And you have control over that. And right now, there's a lot of companies that are renegotiating payment terms because financing is hard to get, it's expensive. A little bit of a turbulent economy right now, so it's a good time to do it. It's very common; everybody's doing it. And if you are in a business model where you absolutely cannot make sure that you get your cash collected before you pay it out, then you do need to have some type of lending or financing relationship because there's no way that you probably can float it on your own. So that's another thing to consider too. Understand your business model and make sure that you have access to a good lending partner.
Yep. Okay, so when to bring in an expert. A couple scenarios here: complex growth or expansion phases, preparing for funding or an acquisition. Another thing that Matt just touched on is understanding if you need help understanding when exactly to bring in more funding or ask for more money from your investor. A couple more scenarios that are here, but if you're really not sure, schedule some time with us. We'd be happy to chat with you about the right time to do some cash flow planning.
100%.
And now, any questions? We've got some time for Q&A here. You have the three of us here to answer any of your questions. So if you have questions on anything we covered, anything we didn't cover involving cash flow, feel free to drop them in the chat.
We must have done an excellent job providing an overview. We got very little questions. All right, Katie, we got one question in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'll read it out for everybody. So if payroll were due tomorrow and a big invoice got delayed, what would you do?
What would you
Who
do,
wants
Eric?
it? Eric?
Yeah, hopefully we're in the situation that we were a little more proactive and saw that coming. But obviously, if we're stuck in that, it's going to be if you don't already have a line of credits and you don't have cash. I don't know, Matt, what would you say?
The real answer is you waited too long. If you were waiting for an invoice to clear the day before payroll is going to get processed, like you've already violated some of the key principles to making sure that doesn't happen. So if it does happen, if you really get in that situation, if you don't have the ability to borrow, if you got a high degree of trust with your team, like you can talk to them, you can talk about potentially delaying payroll with the narrative, the right story. Like you're always in control. There's always something you can do. It just may be hard. You just may have to ask for the team to kind of rally behind you. But that is possible. But the real
You could
answer is
also,
you should
Matt,
never get to that point.
if you have a certain number of team members, you don't have to delay payroll for the entire team. You could just bring a select group of people if that's enough and just delay their part of that payroll and pay the rest of the team so it's not everyone as well. So again, you're in a tough spot at that point, being a day late and a buck short, but there's always
Yeah.
different things you could do.
If that happen, if that happened to you, then we should 100% talk because you can avoid that.
Definitely.
And remember, leaders eat last. So make sure that if that ever does happen, you forego your meal before everybody else.
Yep. Okay, next question we have is how do you explain the cash flow versus profitability issue?
Your P&L is on an accrual basis. So that is just showing you what you will ultimately get at the end of the day. And accrual is important to understand, but as Matt said earlier, cash is king. So just because you invoiced a bunch of things, making up numbers for $1 million, doesn't mean you got $1 million in the bank. You need to actually collect that cash.
Yeah, another big one I think about is, and granted, this is all just the downfalls of accrual based accounting, but like prepaid expenses, right? Like you may have paid an expense that was $100,000 that you get to amortize that cost over your whole year. So you're only picking up 10K or less per month, but you've had $100,000 go out the door. So it's like your P&L is hiding from you the actual cash in and cash out. When you're on a cash basis accounting, which most of our customers are when they're first starting out, you won't see this gap.
Yeah, I think the crux of it's a good question, Ed. The crux of the question, I think it begins the way Katie described, which is like when you first get started, if you don't have a background in finance or accounting, you generally are looking at your bank balance and you're seeing what goes in, you're seeing what goes out, and you're mentally planning for like how to navigate that. And usually it's effective to a point, and it works until it doesn't. When the business gets more complex, which doesn't take long, like you could go from doing 100 grand or 200 grand worth of revenue your first year, you get to a million, you got a team of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. It gets increasingly more difficult to play the mental math game. But it all fundamentally comes down to timing. Just
Yeah.
because you invoice doesn't mean you collect the cash at the same time. Just because you get a vendor invoice in doesn't mean you're going to pay it in the month that the invoice comes in, you record the expense. There's other complicated variables to it. The more complex the business gets, the more of these timing considerations that you need to understand. And that's, I would say, when it starts to get to that point, that's where it makes sense to bring in an expert to help do a consultation to help make sure that you got it all covered. You understand what those variables are.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. We have multiple reimbursement grants. It looks like we have the revenue in, but repayment can take a couple of months. How would you manage that?
It's a
This is
great
again,
question, Samantha. I'm going to assume that this is a nonprofit organization, which we love. That can be challenging, right? I'm going to make some assumptions that you've got some type of budget by program, and you know what the cost to run those programs are going to be, and you have certain grants or funding sources that are helping subsidize some of those programs throughout the year. And you generally have reimbursable grants, which means you got to incur the cost to voucher for it and get paid. And sometimes, depending on the organization funding you, it can take a really long time to get paid. If you don't have cash reserves, I would say as long as you have the grants in place and you have papers for the grant, then it's like a local banking relationship where you have a line of credit for this reason, which is you just need float. It's not to subsidize losses, but it's more to make sure that you have float to cover the costs that you need to get reimbursed later. Very common if you're an organization that's just getting started out, or maybe you're thin on cash reserves or restricted funds that you at the board level. I would say banking relationships the best way to combat that. I think a lot of the community-based banks who generally are very willing to give to local organizations generally are well represented on local organizational boards. I think forging a relationship there is a really good high leverage use of your time if you're an executive director or a CFO, controller, board member. So I would say that's a financing relationship while you're building up some cash reserves over time. And if you have board restricted funds, I would say that's go to them and make sure that you have adequate working capital released so that you can actually subsidize the timing difference here. Good processes too, right? So you want to have good back office operations. So you want to be able to get all of the vouchering for those reimbursable expenses pulled together as soon as possible and get them submitted as soon as possible. And if you can do that, you can build a really strong relationship with whoever the funder is, and maybe you can actually influence or leverage them paying you a little bit more quickly. So we've worked with organizations over at times where it wasn't always perfect. They didn't have good systems. It was hard for them to pull together vouchering requests. They're always late with them. That inevitably translates into erosion of goodwill and sometimes just not being a priority for making sure that you're getting paid. Good practices to make sure that this stuff is well organized, a good funding source, a supportive board. And I think once you get those things in place, you can navigate through it with less stress.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
It's a lot of words. Sorry.
No problem. It's helpful. Okay, next question. Is 13 weeks the sweet spot for forward looking cash flow? Should it be even longer than that? I'm going to have Eric tackle this one unless you want to go again, Matt.
Yeah, I do think 13 weeks is a sweet spot. I don't think you could have it go further, but you truly understand and could predict what's happening in the next 3 months a lot easier. After that, it's more of a guessing game. So it's not that you shouldn't have it going further out, but I would really put most of your attention on the next 13 weeks for sure.
And I agree with Eric. And I'd add to that by saying anything beyond 13 weeks, it becomes really granular and a little bit of a fool's errand to try to get that precise with it. Beyond that, 13 weeks is obviously it's a quarter. A 13-week cash flow is probably like a CFO's best friend. That's how they keep a pulse on the business in the short term. I'd bucket the planning needs of a business into short term and long term. Short term is generally going to be very much about cash flow planning, and 13 weeks is plenty adequate to make sure that you have a good handle on the business. Longer term planning is where you get into more budgeting and forecasting. That is foundational too, right? So like you should start with a 12-month budget. That 12-month budget is going to be like the planned operating performance for your business. You can roll a cash balance forward. You can anticipate your cash balance based on that operating performance. But inherently, that's going to be something that is going to evolve over time. Less mature organizations who are new to planning generally, like you tend to miss on your budgets and forecasts more frequently until you get some good reps or you get the right support to make sure that you don't miss. Once you have the year-long plan in place, I think 13 weeks is totally adequate to make sure that you got like the quarter covered at a more granular level.
Okay, last call for any more questions. These are awesome.
Can we ask a question to the group? Did we just like was this helpful? Did we share some good knowledge with you all today? Thumbs up emojis, thumbs down emojis. I was told I can't use the confetti function on the screen, so we'll have to forego that. Got one thumbs up. We got emojis with heart eyeballs. Okay, we're going to take it as a win.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. As we said, there's 2 great resources that I believe were shared in the chat, and they will also be coming to you after this session, along with the recording will be available if you want to share it with anybody else that you know who you think could benefit from cash flow management. Appreciate the time.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
So long from Team Hiline. Hope to see you soon.